I saw what appeared to be a Cadborosaurus off the coast of Hawaii last summer. I got no photos of the beast, but I've got a story to tell if any of you are interested. My tale starts at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, where I studied for several years in order to specialize in marine biology. All my life, I was fascinated by all forms of life that I encountered or read about, but the creatures that lived in the alien depths of this ocean planet intrigued me the most. From the azure reefs of the Polynesian Islands to the murky depths of the Challenger Deep, everything about the oceans simultaneously terrified and inspired me. Last year was my final one taking the course, with our assignment being focused around engaging in field research of an aquatic species of our choice. Being an avid surfer and kayaker, I naturally chose to study the ubiquitous stellar sea lions that populate the Pacific coast from South Korea to Southern California. If you're even somewhat involved in the marine biologist community, it would have been nearly impossible to not have heard about the recent decline in the population of the sea lions, especially in Alaska. Since I had an interesting premise to study off of, I searched around for a couple of days after being handed my assignment outline. My destination was located in the Hawaii archipelago, a remote and beautiful series of islands located just south of the BC-Alaska border. It took me 2.5 days to drive to Prince Rupert and board a ferry, which took me to the community of Skagate on the eastern coast of the largest islands of the Haidas. After seeing the sites of several of Graham Island's communities for several days, I procured the necessary supplies from my expedition and traveled through the narrow sea passages that would take me to the reefs and sea lion rookeries surrounding a place known as Frederick Island. In particular, I was looking for a place helpfully known as Sea Lion's Rock, where one of the province's largest colonies existed. The people who named the place obviously were not among the brightest, seeing as how the damn pinnipeds hoarded every wave-beaten rock by the dozens. A dangerous storm blowing in from the Aleutian Islands forestalled my progress for 2 days, but as the old Haida saying goes, only a fool starves on the islands. This place seemed like a marine Eden, and I was able to catch enough seafood to get me to my destination. You could not miss the place. From miles away, the incessant barking of the lions roared throughout the coast, and once you got up close, the smell was worse than a Sasquatch's smegma. I paddled up within 100 feet of the rookery and observed the lion for several hours, taking field notes on everything from their physicality to their mannerisms. There was something about them that made me feel off, but I could not quite put my finger on it. After paddling to the base of a nearby mountain and setting up camp for the night, I reflected on what it was that made me so uncomfortable when watching the sea lions. From what I remember, many of the juveniles seemed emaciated, as if they had not been leaving the safety of the rocks for fear of some predator luring them into a watery grave. They were certainly acting like that was the case, with many of them nervously looking out into the endless yonder, where the endless Pacific and stormy sky blurred into a sea of grey. Mulling over these observations, I thought their behaviors could have been due to the recent upsurge in the orcapods around the Great Bear Rainforest, or from the odd shark that had been desperate enough to search for food in the domain of the bull lions. I made a mental note to wake up early the next morning, so that I could scout out a location and lure whatever it was that had been terrifying the sea lions so much. On my return to the rookery's outskirts, I brought with me several lake trout that I had caught a few miles back, along with a bucket of chum, in order to lure anything that had a taste for blood. I dropped the contents of the chum into a nearby patch of kelp forest and tried to lure the lions into the ocean via the fish. Eventually, one that was starving enough to lose sense of its instincts dived into the water after the trout, as did several others. They dove further into the murky abyss, searching for anything else that had fallen to the bottom of the kelpy jungle. Nearly an hour after I had done this, I noticed that the line of buoyant sags used by the kelp to maintain an upright position were being dragged by something massive from underneath the water. Thinking that it might have been an orca or even some sort of large baleen whale, I got excited and managed to paddle out of the way of the turbulence so that whatever was down there would not capsize my kayak. I was worried as to what would happen to the sea lions, but most of them luckily clambered onto the rocks to safety just in time. The rest were not as lucky. I craned my neck over the boat, just enough so that I could see what was going on. What I saw has filled me with a primal terror that has stayed with me to this day, especially whenever I go near any large source of water. At first, I did not see anything. It was what I heard next that made me piss myself. If I could say anything about the noise, it was like the guttural roar of a crocodile mixed with the morning calls of a sperm whale. My entire body was stricken with fear. I knew that whatever was in the water was not anything that we had covered back in the comfortable halls of the university. My reptilian brain won me over, and I sat there like a sitting duck, only being able to watch as the remaining sea lions swam to shore. They were more terrified than I was, and for good reason too. When the second last lion flew onto the rocks, it was dragged down into the depths by a leviathan that I've only read about on fringe websites. It had a blowhole similar to a cetacean's on the top of its head, with a melon-like organ below it that I assume will be used for some sort of echolocation. The eyes were as ghostly as a pickerel's, and the face appeared to be a combination between that of a barracuda and a horse. When it dragged the lion back down into the water, I was able to see that it had what appeared to be whale-like appendages and a fluke tail, but the body was as serpentine as an eel. When it emerged, more than a minute later, it threw the barking lion high up in the air and crushed it with its jaws. The teeth looked like the horns of a goat and were as large as bananas. Blood flew everywhere, and as the long-necked hellspawn of the sea consumed its gruesome meal, it turned its gaze to me and intently watched as I squirmed in my tiny plastic boat. Deciding to leave me alone for God knows what reason, it roared an ear-shattering roar that I could never replicate and dived back down into the dark waters. From this, I was able to make out what appeared to be streamlined dorsal ridges on the creature's back, as well as grayish camouflage patterns similar to that of a great white shark. Considering the length of the rookery, it must have been 60 to 70 feet long, nearly as big as some of the whales I've seen on tours back in the Maritimes. The turbulence from its sudden submersion nearly dragged me under, but I was able to balance the kayak enough that I could stay afloat. I waited for my certain death, convinced that the thing had me next in mind on its grocery list. After hyperventilating in fear for what seemed like hours, I opened my eyes and noticed that it was gone. I paddled back to shore with the intensity of a man who had seen the devil himself and lived to tell the tale, although this obviously was not fueled by brave heroism. Nope. It was the adrenaline our ancestors probably experienced after somehow escaping the jaws of a crocodile from all those years back into the ancestral memories we picked up from Africa. I hugged the coasts and walked 20 miles back to my car as soon as I found the nearest portage route. Whether you choose to believe in my tale or not is up to you, but know this: the oceans have many secrets that they have yet to share with the world, and many of them will only be revealed not through the benevolence of nature, but through its gaping jaws. I don't know if whatever it was I saw back there was some remnant of the dinosaur age, or an unknown serpentine cetacean, but they are out there. I have stories from my uncle about encountering whatever this thing was when he was fishing, but none of them were ever very clear or accurate, so I never gave it much thought until the day I believe I saw the same thing for myself. This happened to me back in 2012. My little brother and I went fishing off of a pier with some friends. We were on an island off the coast of Alabama. The place was called Dauphin Island. We did not catch anything that day, so we decided to pack up early. I think it was right around noon. We did it before anybody else had come down there yet, since leaving would be easier instead of having to deal with everybody around us. We started hearing strange noises in the water around us, which immediately caught our attention. We heard and saw lots of movement and splashing. Even my little brother was perplexed, so we both turned and watched, expecting something to happen because we were not quite sure what all this movement in the water was about. Were the fish suddenly biting? And then, I don't even think it was more than a few seconds later, out from the water suddenly emerges the dark figure. This was the strangest thing I have ever seen. In fact, it had come so close, it could have easily reached out and grabbed hold of me. The thing was shaped like a snake or a serpent of some kind. It appeared to almost have a sort of beak at the end of its face and sharp fins on both sides of its dark, slender body. It stayed horizontal to the water surface, as if it was swimming forwards towards us. It looked like it was getting ready to strike, and before we even realized it, it was disappearing back into the depths below from which it came, without ever taking its glowing eyes off of us. We sat there in shock, waiting for about 5 minutes after, just to make sure that this thing was not going to come back. Well, I think it was more so from the shock than anything else. I mean, it's not like we were wanting to wait around for this thing. To this day, I don't know exactly what it is that we saw out there in those waters, yet, whatever it may have been, I know one thing for certain. I do not want to see it ever again. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. I thought this day would be like any other. I sat there looking at the water from my family's back porch. The day was gloomy and overcast, with little peaks here and there of sunshine. It always kind of looked foreboding, but that did not stop my crazy family from wanting to go jump in the lake. I was a little nervous about going in the water. I always was. I hated how cold it was, and the initial shock that you get when you jump in. The icy cold water feeling in your whole body is horrible. My family loved it though, and didn't really care. My cousins were all taking their sweet time getting into the lake, just having fun, so I put on my shirt, my shorts. I wanted to show them that I was not afraid to go swimming just yet. I stood up quickly and walked down towards the dock. Everybody else had already just now jumped off and were heading towards the center of the lake. It looked like they were going to race to the other side. Even my sisters made their way back to the shore before I could even get in. They were already getting their towels on and walking back up to the house. Well, eventually, everybody else started heading out into the lake instead of just sitting around talking. Even my mother got in, which is weird. She virtually never goes swimming. So I made my way back down the dock and see that the majority of all of my family was getting in the water, calling for me to get in too. I would be lying if I said I was not nervous, but a few minutes later, after all my brothers had all fully submerged in the water, I, of course, was the square one. They were being eager, wanting me to jump in, and I could feel my skin tingling with goosebumps as I walked down toward where I knew the water's edge was. The wind at this point had begun picking up, and there was this unmistakable chill in the air that had not been there all morning. Everybody else seemed completely unaffected. I just tried my best to ignore it. I made my way onto the dock, jumping off without any hesitation. As soon as my feet hit the water, they were nearly numb from how cold it was. It felt like jumping into an ice bath. So as soon as I re-emerged, I swam out away from the dock towards where everybody else was swimming around together. I did not want it to seem to anybody that I was too scared to go even a few feet further. My family decided they should all have a race to the other side of the lake. They ended up leaving me behind. I was not the best swimmer in the world, so I was not exactly expecting to keep up, but just then, in that moment, as I was probably about 50 to 60 feet away from the dock, I could feel something slithering underneath me. It felt like something slimy, like seaweed or something, brushing up against my legs. I kind of had an urge to grab onto something to pull myself away, but there was not anything near me, since I was just treading open water at that point. The feeling of dread grew inside me like a wildfire as I swam further away from the dock, not wanting anybody to see just how scared I really was. For some reason, it kept drawing closer and closer until I could feel it all around my legs. This long, slimy thing was wrapping tightly around them and making my movements now impossible. Slightly panicking at this point, I tried kicking at it, but I did not feel like anything was really there. It was now squeezing so hard, I could feel everything. That is when I full on panicked. I tried to scream, but my voice locked up no matter how hard I tried. It began to drag me underwater and everything got darker. The further I sank, the harder I fought against whatever this thing was dragging me down. The grip of this thing became stronger and stronger around my legs, squeezing them tightly together like a snake or a python constricting its prey. What initially felt like slimy seaweed brushing up against my leg now felt like a tentacle of some sorts, like some sort of long muscly arm holding against me, pulling me down. I continued to push upward, reaching towards the surface for what felt like forever, but I could not quite get there, no matter how hard I kicked or swam with all of my strength. So I decided that instead of panicking in that moment, I would do everything that I could to fight back against this. My arms were now burning, but the more I reached for the surface, the closer it came to me. My whole body now was on fire with pain, and my lungs felt like they were going to explode from the inside out. I could not stop fighting against whatever was dragging me down. I felt something brush up against my face now and instinctively grabbed at it. It did nothing to slow this thing that had grabbed me in its clutches. Instead, I felt a branch or something that was drifting that might help. In that moment, I felt what can only be described as teeth sinking into my leg, jaws locking themselves around my thigh, and pulling hard enough back, it nearly pulled me back down into the water. And for a split second, I took in a large gasp of air before being yanked back down underneath the surface. And of course, my family at this point was so far away from me, completely oblivious to what happened to me. They did not hear or notice a thing. At first, this thing, whatever it was, began wrapping around me longer and tighter. Its body wrapped around mine several times over, before finally coming back towards its head to join with what looked like a fin sticking straight out of the top of it. The pressure inside of my lungs was growing worse and worse as whatever this thing was pulling me deeper into the abyss below us both. It would move in these modulating patterns of slowly releasing me and then gripping me even tighter. It's almost like it was reworking its muscles so it could get a tighter, stronger grip on me. All the while, it was pulling me down, 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 and in one of its modulations of movement, as it was releasing itself to pull tighter, I used that moment to break free from the excruciating pain. And just as I broke free, I felt these teeth biting down onto my arm this time. I felt flesh tearing from my arm, and for a second, I was free from its clutches. But I was not entirely out of danger just yet. Finally free, I swam towards the surface. I began going as fast as I could towards the shore, with this thing under the water right next to me, pursuing me. My whole body now was going numb from the lack of oxygen and the blood loss. I did not dare slow down, not even for a moment. I did not bother to try and scream, because I knew that would deplete my oxygen even more. I could feel the water on me churning as this thing swam upwards towards me, directly below my feet. Whatever it was big, and it was now gaining on me fast enough. I knew I was not going to make it far before its teeth were locked around my legs again. Knowing how close behind me this thing was made me swim insanely fast. It felt like forever before all of a sudden this thing came right back at me. It slammed into the side of my leg so hard I went completely under the water yet again. Then I was pulled down by this thing yet another time, and somehow I managed to break free a final time. Then I managed to get towards the shallow part of the shoreline. Now, whatever this was appeared to be retreating towards the darkest, deepest part of the lake. I was able to drag myself out of the water and onto the safety of land where I could finally catch my breath. Every single inch of my body felt like it was on fire and burning, like I just nearly died. The feeling of being back on dry land was the best feeling of my life. My family came over after finally hearing all of the commotion. They saw me climb onto the shore and collapse. They were freaking out, and I had an ambulance called. After seeing the lacerations and bite marks on my arms and legs, they were very unsure of what had happened. As soon as I was back home, they were worried about me. They did not want to leave my side for a second. I hate using the term lake monster, but there was something in that lake that was going to drag me down and finish me had I let it. I don't know what it was, but it was no ordinary creature. It was late at night when I went out to do my last check on the net before finally calling it a night. It had been yet another successful day of fishing. I was feeling pretty good about everything as I walked alongside this side of the boat. The sun had just begun to go down roughly about an hour ago, and there was still more than enough light for me to see clearly. The fish we were catching out here were getting large, so we needed bigger and bigger boats. Since we started setting up shop here 4 years ago, nothing has really changed about our fishing methods, but for some reason, the fish have been getting larger and larger and more consistently better. I don't really know what to think about it anymore, other than the fact that we are going to need a much larger boat if we plan on doing this long term. As I was walking alongside the boat, something large came up into view ahead. In the distance, it looked as though it were just floating there, lifelessly. It was not moving at all. I thought it was odd at first. I assumed it was maybe just a large piece of driftwood or some sort of buoy that had drifted out from somewhere else. Maybe it just managed to drift out here from somewhere. Then I see a large mass begin shifting around slightly from side to side before coming to rest once again. Several more seconds have passed by, and nothing. Just lifeless movement. Now I was getting concerned as well as confused at what it was I was seeing. As it began to take shape more and more, I could tell that this was some sort of large, serpent-like creature. It was something that was too large to just be a normal fish, and much larger than a regular oarfish. Oarfish, by the way, are very often mistaken for sea serpents. I assumed it had something to do with all the large quantities of fish that we had been catching recently. Probably a food thing. Whatever it was though, I wanted nothing more than to get away from this large mass. The more and more I looked, the larger it seemed to become. I started cutting across the water towards the stern of my ship, hoping whatever this large thing was, it would go away quickly. I didn't feel like paying attention to its movements anymore. I continued on the way I had originally came, not wanting to turn around or look behind me for any reason whatsoever, but something told me to turn and look. As I did, even though I had probably made it no more than 50 feet away from where I was when I originally put my eyes on the thing, it had grown in size. Maybe not grown, but more of it had emerged on the surface, and I was stunned to see that it was larger than I could ever have imagined, much larger than initially speculated. And now it wasn't quite so lifeless. It actually was moving much more, and it was very clear now. It was also not very far away. It was undulating up and down slowly, kind of like a giant eel would. It was doing this instead of moving side to side, like I originally thought it had been since I first saw this thing. I realized that this oceanic monster was much larger than I ever could have thought possible. If you had told me this thing was several hundred feet long, I would have believed you. While not so massive in girth, the body of this thing as it continued to emerge more throughout the water proved to be much longer. I could tell it was sort of stretching outward. It was really hard for me to tell if there was a face or eyes because I could not really see that. In fact, I was more so focused on the jet black inky color and how long and slimy its body looked. It looked like an elongated tentacle sprawled out. I wanted nothing more than to get back up on my deck as quickly as possible, but I was worried about appearing weak or frightened. So instead, I ran for my life where I left my crew, before turning around and seeing this thing again. The adrenaline pumping through my veins had made me feel like I was running faster than I'd ever run before in my life. I could finally breathe a sigh of relief as I had reached up onto our boat's deck. Nobody else appeared the least bit concerned. I turned around once more for a final time to see it fully vanishing under the water surface right in front of my eyes. I saw every single inch of that thing just disappear. It has been several months now on sea since seeing that thing, and I will never forget it for as long as I live. I believe this thing only left us alone because either A, we were not food, or B, it did not see us as a threat. It could have probably eaten the entire ship in just one bite if it wanted to. It could easily have killed us all. Be me. This happened to me 8 to 9 years ago. I am really into recreational diving. My friend Dan and I take a boat out onto the ocean with our girlfriends tagging along. We plan to test out some new gear / equipment that we had just purchased. On a scale of 1 to 10 on the nice day out scale, it's a fucking 30 out of 10. Nice clear skies, shining sun. Dan and I get our suits on, get our tanks, and prepare to go down below the ocean. Our GFs stay topside on the boat. We descend. We basically start off by dicking around, and I make a joke about finding pirate treasure or something like that. We are exploring well below the surface, but there is still light, mostly getting a sight of the sea life. There are just schools upon schools of fish swimming past us. Not gonna lie, shit was pretty cash. But that suddenly changes when all of the fish begin dispersing frantically. They are noping right the fuck out. We start to think, oh shit, a big ass shark must be nearby. Dan and I get a brief glimpse of a shadow above us. The fucking thing is no shark. It's more cylindrical, fast. It swam right above us. We want nothing more than to freak the fuck out, but we can't, as that would be potentially dangerous. We look above us to see if we could get a better view of the thing. We don't entirely have to. This thing noticed us. Imagine your traditional Chinese dragon, now add in fins and flippers in the place of arms, and has reptile-esque facial features. All in all, Dan and I are at a loss. This is a real-life sea monster. It eyes us for a few seconds, then snaps its jaws at us like a kind of a warning before it finally swims off in another direction. Dan and I use this as an opportunity to swim back up to the surface. We get back on the boat, and we begin swearing and screaming and freaking the ever-living fuck out. The girls had seen some sort of dark outline sometime prior to our sighting. We nope the fuck out of that particular area. We get back to the marina and swear to never tell anyone about what happened. We still continue to dive. We still do so in the ocean waters, but man, that entire day fucked me right up.